Professions Interview Workshop. My name is Lauren Albaum, and I'm Health Professions Advisor here at USF. Today we're going to be talking about all of the different aspects to prepare you for your interview. This may be slightly different than an interview workshop you might have been to at the Career Center or at some professional office, because we're mainly focusing on what the interview will look like and how you prepare for applying to medical school, dental school, vet school, podiatry, optometry, and some of the questions that they may be interested in knowing about you. So, there's a fun little clip here. This is, an example of a med school interview. And so I want to get your thoughts on this interview situation. Or maybe we won't. Well, I'll give you the gist of it. It's essentially a poor interview. So your humor for today, we've lost it from our workshop today, but it's a poor example of an interview. They take over the interview, they're arrogant, they eat during their interview, they use crude humor during their interview. A lot of the things that we will not recommend that you do in an interview. So if you can imagine it, that's what happened. And so it was not a perfect interview. So how many of you are currently applying or hoping to get interviews or have an interview? Okay, the rest of you are looking maybe next year or the year after in terms of hopefully securing an interview. Okay, good. Still good information to have as you prepare. So some of you may already be here or here. Some of you may not even be here, and that's okay. But just so that you see the entire process, you're going to start with the primary application. When you are competitive, in summer, you are going to apply. Summer is when we would recommend that you apply for a competitiveness factor. You're going to submit that primary application. Most programs will then have a secondary application. The primary application is general, meaning it's put out by the associations, not the individual schools. So the ADEA for dental school will put out the primary application, or the AMCAS or AACOMAS for med school will put out the primary application, which has general information about your work and activities, any professional experience, any honors and awards, your GPA, and that's what goes in the primary application. Secondary applications are put out by each individual program. So if they have additional information that they want to know about you, then they're going to send you a secondary application. Not all schools will send secondary applications, and not all students will receive a secondary application. Some schools, if they use a secondary application process, will send them to everyone, and some schools will only send those secondary applications to those students that they've indicated as they want to know more about. If you receive a secondary application, you will fill that out to the best of your abilities, spending a significant amount of time answering those questions because that specific school wants to know those answers. After the secondary application process, then they will use this information to determine who gets an interview. For things like medical school, they may have 5,000 to 6,000 applicants per school. Maybe a couple thousand will get a secondary application, and out of that they have to determine who's going to get an interview. Generally, a much smaller proportion are going to be offered an interview. If there's about 150 seats per school, you can kind of assume on average about 300 to 500 will be asked to interview. But that's a stark difference from maybe the 5,000 to 6,000 who applied. And then after the interview, they're going to use that interview as a way to get to know you. They've already reviewed your primary and secondary application. They've already know the details about your academic history and your extracurricular experiences. Now they want to know more about them. They want to know why they mattered. And then they're going to use all of this information to offer acceptances to those people that they feel are a good fit for their institution. So again, why do they have the interview process? Because you can be really good on paper, but they want to know about you. So they already know your qualifications, they know your GPA, they know what activities you've been involved in, but now they want to know more in depth, more details. They want to know how you've internalized these processes. They want to know what skills and traits you bring to the table that weren't necessarily articulated in print. They will be judging you on your professionalism, your personal skills, and are you a good fit for their specific school? Will you fit in with their student body, with their ethos? Do you have similar values to what it is that they hold as important for their school? And so all of that's determined in the interview process. They're no longer, and I will reiterate this again, they're no longer seeing if you have the academic qualifications. They have already determined that you do, if you have made it to the interview process. They are now seeing if you are a good fit. So we'll talk a little bit about the preparation process. So if you are looking to interview soon, you will be starting to do these things almost immediately. If not, you may be wanting to remember these things for down the line. The most important thing that I can tell any student who is going to interview is to know yourself. Now this sounds somewhat simple, know yourself. Of course you know yourself. You've been with yourself for, 17 to 35 years, however, depending on how old you are, or longer. But you must have a much greater understanding of why you are pursuing this and what you can offer the profession, the school, and what you value. Some of these things we don't think about on a daily basis. We do things, we're monotonous, we go through the motions. You have to know yourself inside and out. Do you have a good head and a good heart? Meaning, are you able to not only handle the rigor of the coursework, a good head? Do you have the capacity to withstand the 20 to 25 hours of coursework each semester? Is that something that you are interested in doing for 2+ years? And do you have a good heart? Meaning, is this what your heart is into? Not what mom and dad have encouraged you to do, not what is a lucrative career and will look good on paper, but is your heart invested in this profession? So both your head and your heart. How do you fit in the future of this career? Right? And we'll talk about that a little bit later about knowing the career, but you have to know the career, and then will you continue to fit into this profession? So are you making an informed choice? Not only just about the profession, but yourself and how you will navigate this career over your lifespan. You will have this career for 50+ years potentially, 40 to 50 years. Is this where you are going to continually fit? And what experiences do you have that make you know that this is a good fit? What did you learn from those experiences? You also want to be sure that you've reviewed your application. Anything on your application is fair game, or in your personal statement. It doesn't look great if you put something in the application or on the personal statement, and then they ask you about it and you aren't necessarily sure, right? You should know yourself. You should know when you have already wrote that personal statement or completed that application, you should know inside and out what you put down and why it mattered and why you value that activity. So you definitely want to make sure to review that information before you go into the interview in case they do bring it up. Knowing the profession. So healthcare is one of the most rapidly changing professions in our country. It is one of the most lucrative and it's one of the most needed. So there are constant changes throughout every aspect of healthcare, regardless of what it is, what area that you're going into. And I would argue that almost everything, if not everything, impacts healthcare. Everything. And so that's what one of the recommendations in our office is to continually stay up to date with current events. Because everything influences healthcare, and you have to know how something may influence you or the profession. So what's changing? What has changed in the last decade? What do you envision or what do you believe will change in the next decade? What qualities and traits are generally needed for someone to be successful in this career? Right? Again, you don't necessarily have to have a very strong stance one way or another, right? Having a very strong kind of polar stance on a hot topic or a very debated topic may not necessarily actually be a good thing, right? The interviewees all have their own personal bias. So if you start to rant and rave about your personal views on medical marijuana or state-assisted suicide or abortion, right? You are showing that you are knowledgeable about that area, but you also may inadvertently potentially offend an interviewer if they don't share that same view. So it's generally more recommended that you are knowledgeable about the field, but maybe you don't have to use that